China urges both sides in Sudan's armed conflict to cease fire as soon as possible and to avoid further escalation. After fighting broke out in Sudan over the weekend, China's Ministry of Foreign Affairs called on all parties to strengthen dialogue and jointly advance the political transition process. After weeks of rising tension, armed clashes erupted between the Sudanese armed forces and a paramilitary group called the Rapid Support Forces, or RSF. Both sides accused the other of starting the conflict and made conflicting claims about who controlled key positions. The United Nations, the Arab League and China, as well as other countries, have also called for an immediate ceasefire. So what have led to the fierce clashes? Will the turmoil spill across the border and destabilize the fragile region? And what can the international community do to support efforts to politically resolve the crisis? I'm pleased to be joined from Juba, South Sudan, by freelance multimedia journalist Garang Abraham Malak, and from Beijing by Zhang Yongpeng from the Institute of West Asia and African Studies of the Chinese Academy of Social Sciences, and also senior fellow with the think tank Taihe Institute. Gentlemen, welcome to The Point. Mr. Garang Abraham Malak, let me go to you first, and thank you very much for joining us from Juba at this very early hour. How serious and widespread, according to your understanding, is the conflict at this stage?
Thank you very much for having me. Like you've mentioned, my name is Garang Abraham Malak. I'm a freelance journalist, and I've been covering South Sudan and Sudan for quite some time when I was writing for a regional paper called Nation Media. The positive news is Baran and Himiti have agreed to 72-hour ceasefire, which is something very positive after fighting for the last 3 days. A fight that has led to death of over 100 people and over 1,800 wounded, which was really a very bad news. So what is positive coming out from Sudan currently is the agreement for a 72-hour ceasefire by the two armed generals.
Yeah. Well, actually, the latest news overnight from the United Nations citing Sudanese authorities is that almost over 180 people have been killed and over 2,600 have been wounded. But Mr. Zhang, help us understand how big is the Chinese presence in Sudan and how badly have they been affected by the violence so far?
Yeah, I think China should actively join in the peaceful mediation between the two factions and try to give alarm to the Chinese enterprises in Sudan to protect themselves and their life and their wealthies. And the most important up to now, I think, is the mediation by the African Union and some prestigious African leaders. For example, the president of South Sudan and Djibouti and Kenya has been invited into the mediation. And I think it is most possible if, with the joining of these African leaders and the African problems or issues, with the African solution will function finally. I think it's possible. And otherwise, the results of civil war could not be avoided, most probably.
Mr. Garang Abraham Malak, the fighting is between the Sudanese armed forces and the RSF under the leadership of General Dagalo, otherwise known as Hemeti. The group, as we know, grew out of a paramilitary group called the Janjaweed. So what are their aspirations and what are the disagreements between the two generals which have led to this armed conflict?
I think the major disagreement that has led to this is the unification of the forces in a workshop last week organized by IGAD and African Union. As per the agreement, the rapid forces plus the Sudanese army are supposed to be unified into one professional army. And I think this is where the biggest problem came in. Professional sources from the Sudanese Professional Association have mentioned that Himiti, who is the head of rapid forces, agreed for his forces to be put under one professional army. But Boran, who heads the armed forces of Sudanese due to Muslim Brotherhood issues, wasn't agreeing to that. And I think that's where the biggest issue came in here, the unification of forces into one professional army.
But historically, Mr. Zhang, what are the longer-term underlying reasons for this disagreement? Some people have actually been warning that the eruption of violence was just a matter of time. Do you agree as well?
You know, I think historically, in quite a long time, there had been several of the serious conflicts, including the military coups, and several of the agreements have been reached frequently, but finally, all of these agreements seldom been realized finally. But this time, I think it could be possible to be reached if with the strong mediation.
So, Mr. Zhang, Mr. Zhang, you mentioned two things here. First of all, past agreements were seldom implemented, but this time you think there is a real possibility. What makes you say these?
Because the controversies between the two generals is not something very fundamental, because it is only an issue of power sharing, and not the issue of religious, of ethnic groups. And so if they can sit down and join in the negotiation and reach some agreement on the power sharing, and especially under the interference of the international community, and especially the African Union and African leaders, and I think finally they will find a solution. And furthermore, I think if the because now the two generals' power and the military forces are just parallel, and they cannot say that who will beat who finally. And so who will be the final winner? It is difficult to say. So finally, I think they will given to share some powers to each other and find a solution.
Okay. Mr. Malak, what is your answer? Because last year, the various parties signed a framework deal vowing to install a civilian government and remove the military from power, and the deadline was April the 11th, but they failed. So what went wrong with these past deals? And do you agree with Mr. Zhang that right now there is some possibility for a real agreement that will work?
I would basically say politicians are politicians. Most of African politicians are quick to sign agreements, but it becomes a problem later when it goes to implementation. So I would basically say yes. There could be hope that once they go to table and there is proper structure of power sharing, they might implement that. But for Sudanese peace deal, I think what is a priority here is ensuring that when the civilian-led government takes over, because if you implement power sharing, having the two generals together, having who under who and who under who will bring a problem. So if this agreement can really stipulate for the civilian government, prime minister to lead, and then the two generals work together with these, I think would really be appropriate. But if the agreement continues to have, an armed general ruling Sudan for quite some time, I think there will continue to be disagreement between Himiti and Boran. That's my take.
Yeah, so Mr. Malak, do you think that this time there will be a real possibility of some kind of implementation, some kind of a change, positive change in the situation? In the near term, do you think the fighting will produce a winner and the situation will stabilize? Basically, that is the question.
Not at all. You see, I mean, war has no winner, because at the end of the day, civilians are the one affected. I mean, the armed general will continue to torment, I mean, themselves. But who are the losers? The losers are the civilians. So there is no winner, when it comes to these. What is vital is IGAD and the African Union should really tighten discussion between these two generals, and what should continue is the framework agreement that really stipulates for a lot of effective measures to be put in place for a civilian-led government, for unification of the army into one professional army, for demilitarization and demobilization. I think this is a way forward. But this can be achieved through a comprehensive dialogue that IGAD and African Union should tighten on, and really let Sudan government, or Sudan leaders, know that Sudan is Sudan, and they are destabilizing their people, not another people. And they need to be held to account for what they do.
But Mr. Zhang, Mr. Zhang, you just now really expressed the hope that with the intervening of regional leaders and regional organizations, there is a chance that peace can be brokered, that there will be some kind of a arrangement acceptable to different parties. What exactly gives you that confidence, that level of hope?
I think it is a hopeful still, because East African organization, IGAD, for example, could play an active role in this mediation.
But did these regional players not play a role in the past, in the agreements that were signed in the past?
Yeah, they did something really, but this time, as I just now mentioned, that is this time it is only some disputes from the on the power sharing. It's not some major problem, but small, and at least we could say this is a problem only on surface, not with some deep root. And so I think through the mediation and the efforts made by the regional organizations, the problem will be finally dissolved.
So you don't think that the conflict will prolong considerably, Mr. Zhang?
Yes, I think so.
Yeah. Mr. Malak, your take quickly?
Yes, I think what is vital quickly is to bring the two armies on table, and if that is not done immediately, the fighting will prolong, and it will continue to affect a lot of people across Sudan.
Okay. A quick word on the Chinese investments in Sudan, Mr. Zhang. How much should they be concerned about the safety of their personnel and projects?
Yeah, I think up to now China has invested quite a lot in various kinds of the projects in Sudan, and in the future, I think it will keep going on.
All right. Okay, we have to leave it there. Many thanks to Mr. Zhang Yongpeng joining us from Beijing, and Garang Abraham Malak joining us from Juba, South Sudan.